Welcome, adventurers, to a journey back in time, straight into the heart of medieval Europe. Get ready to explore a world of knights, castles, and secrets buried deep in the annals of history. From the grandeur of royal courts to the quiet villages, we'll uncover the untold stories of the people who shaped this fascinating era. If you're as excited as we are to dive into this captivating journey, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more adventures into the past. Let's uncover the mysteries of the Middle Ages together. Hit that bell icon too, so you're always first in line for the next historical adventure. So settle in, fluff your pillow, maybe light a candle. Let's dim the lights and take a deep, relaxing breath. Can people have a good sleep in medieval times? A question that, at first, might seem odd. After all, in the modern world, we have memory foam mattresses, blackout curtains, and white noise machines to help us fall asleep. We are lucky enough to control the conditions of our rest. But what about in the Middle Ages? Could people sleep well then, without the comforts we take for granted today? And what can we learn from their sleep patterns? Understanding medieval sleep, the biphasic pattern. In medieval times, sleep was not what we know today. The concept of sleeping through the night in one continuous stretch didn't really exist. Instead, medieval people followed a biphasic sleep pattern, sleeping in two distinct phases, commonly known as the first sleep and second sleep. After the evening meal, people would go to bed soon after sunset. They would sleep for a few hours, generally from around 9 p.m. to midnight. This was the first sleep, where they rested and recovered from the physical demands of the day. Then, around midnight, they would wake up. This wasn't unusual or even seen as a disruption. People would often stay awake for an hour or two. Some would pray, reflect on dreams, or even engage in private conversations. It was not uncommon for couples to share a more intimate moment during this waking time. This wakeful period was an integral part of medieval sleep culture. Without the distractions of modern technology and artificial lighting, the middle of the night was a moment of stillness, an opportunity to reflect, engage in quiet activities, or connect with others. After this brief period of wakefulness, they would return to bed for the second sleep, sleeping again until the early morning hours, around 5 or 6 a.m. This second phase of sleep, though shorter, was just as important for the restoration of energy for the new day. The concept of segmented or biphasic sleep in medieval times is well documented in historical records. It is clear from many sources that people commonly practiced this sleep pattern, especially before the widespread use of artificial lighting. Several historical texts, including references in literature and medical writings from the time, note this wakeful period in the middle of the night. Historical evidence from Europe, particularly from the 14th and 15th centuries, shows that it was a cultural norm for people to sleep in two distinct phases. In medieval times, there was no artificial lighting to extend the evening hours, and nightfall naturally led to sleep. According to historians and medical records, people would sleep for several hours, then wake in the middle of the night, often for an hour or two, before returning to sleep again until dawn. The practice of biphasic sleep was not limited to one region. It was common throughout medieval Europe, and this natural rhythm of sleeping was closely tied to both the lack of artificial lighting and the biological need to adjust sleep to the daylight hours. While today we aim for 8 hours of continuous sleep, this fragmented sleep cycle was a natural and necessary part of life for medieval people. A night's sleep in a wealthy noble family's home in medieval times. Now let's travel to the Grand Castle, late 1300s, Northern Europe. As dusk begins to settle over the castle, the air is cool, heavy with the scent of dew and fresh earth, mingling with the faint aroma of burning wood from the hearths. The flickering orange light from candles and oil lamps casts dancing shadows across the high stone walls of the family's expansive chambers. The night is calm, with a hint of wind whispering through the narrow castle windows. This is the home of a wealthy noble family. Their wealth is apparent not only in their clothing, but in their grand, well-furnished living quarters. Their castle is adorned with tapestries and velvet drapes. The furniture is made of fine oak, and intricate carvings of lions and eagles decorate the wooden beams. The room itself, nestled in one of the castle's towers, boasts large, arched windows that overlook the vast estate, and its large four-poster bed is the centerpiece. The bedroom is a luxurious sanctuary. The husband and wife's bed is grand, a four-poster with thick embroidered silk curtains that can be drawn closed for privacy or left open to allow the soft moonlight to filter in. The canopy above the bed is adorned with intricate golden trim, and the bed itself is covered with a rich red velvet duvet, lined with fur at the edges. The mattress, thick and comfortable, is filled with down feathers, providing a softness that contrasts the harsh stone floor below. Pillows of silk, plump and inviting, are placed at the head of the bed. In the corner of the room, there is a large wooden wardrobe, elegantly carved with floral patterns, holding the finest attire of the couple. A small table beside the bed holds a bowl of water for washing, a candle holder, and a few books of religious devotion or courtly poetry. The room is warm, despite the chill of the evening air outside, with a hearth crackling in the far corner, filling the space with a gentle heat and the comforting scent of burning oak. There's a palpable sense of comfort and wealth. This is not just a bedroom, it is a private domain. The noblewoman is dressed in a fine silk gown, embroidered with gold thread and pearls, with a delicate lace collar and cuffs. Her hair, long and dark, is carefully braided and adorned with small golden clasps. As she prepares for bed, she loosens the lace of her gown and changes into a soft silk nightdress, long, flowing, and designed for comfort while still reflecting her noble status. Her husband, similarly dressed in rich fabrics, wears a velvet tunic adorned with precious stones and a fine linen undershirt. As the night progresses, he changes into a simple, comfortable nightshirt of fine linen, though still rich enough to denote his high status. The couple moves around the room with quiet grace, undressing slowly, preparing for the night. Their movements are calm, almost ritualistic, and there is a moment of mutual recognition of the day's work done. As they remove their layers of clothing, their gazes occasionally meet, and a small smile passes between them, a silent acknowledgement of their shared day, filled with courtly events and responsibilities. Before bed, they may share a few moments of conversation, talking quietly about the affairs of the court, the children, or perhaps plans for the coming day. Their voices are soft, barely audible, mingling with the sounds of the crackling fire. The couple, in keeping with the tradition of the times, lies down in the large bed. They each settle into their places, her on the left, him on the right, and pull the covers up to their chins. The candles are blown out, leaving the room bathed in the soft glow of the fire. They fall into the first part of the night's sleep, their bodies curling into the warmth of the bed, the coolness of the night air kept at bay by their warm bedding. In a separate, equally grand room, their children, an 8-year-old boy and a 6-year-old daughter, prepare for bed in their royal bedroom. The room is smaller than that of the parents, but it's just as lavish. Rich tapestries depicting mythical beasts hang from the stone walls, and the bed is a smaller version of the parents' four-poster. Their bed is draped in soft, pastel-coloured linens, embroidered with simple patterns of flowers and animals, while plush pillows surround them. The light from the hearth flickers against their delicate wooden toys that sit on the shelves. Their clothing is much simpler than the parents', but still reflects their noble status. The boy wears a soft woolen tunic and loose trousers, while his sister is dressed in a light embroidered gown made of fine cotton. Her hair is loosely braided, and she wears a small silver clasp in her hair, denoting her highborn status. The children react to bedtime with the excitement and hesitation of youth. They know their bedtime is near, but their wide eyes and innocent faces show they don't want to let go of the excitement of the day. The boy, full of energy, runs to his bed, almost jumping in. The girl, with a giggle, pretends to resist, trying to delay the moment, but her father gently nudges her toward the bed. Before sleep, they share a bedtime story, whispered softly by their mother, who has entered the room to tuck them in. Her voice is calm, soothing, as she recounts stories of their ancestors and noble deeds, stories they love to hear before drifting off. As the family settles into their sleep, the children begin to drift into the first phase of their sleep cycle. Their beds, soft and warm, are cozy with heavy blankets, making it easy to relax. The air is calm in their room, and the occasional sound of the wind outside or a distant owl hooting can be heard. Their breathing becomes slow and rhythmic as they succumb to the first sleep of the night. After a few hours of restful slumber, the couple awakens. It is around midnight. The room is still dim, the fire flickering low in the hearth, casting long shadows. The night is quiet, save for the distant sounds of the castle settling and the occasional rustle of the wind outside. They lie awake in the dark, their bodies still warmed by the covers. For a moment, there is no conversation. They simply lie side by side, listening to the stillness of the night. Perhaps the wife will reach out to her husband's hand, or they might exchange a few quiet words, but generally, they remain in a reflective silence. This wakeful time, though brief, is sacred. A moment of peace before the return to sleep. For the children, if they wake up during this time, their parents may gently guide them back to their slumber, perhaps whispering soothing words or offering a gentle touch to help them settle again. The second sleep cycle begins. The couple once again pulls the blankets over themselves and drifts back into a deep, peaceful sleep. The children, too, settle back into the warmth of their beds, their small bodies snuggled deeply under the blankets, protected from the cold stone walls around them. Their breathing steadies, and the peacefulness of the castle at night envelops them. As dawn begins to break, the first rays of sunlight filter through the windows, casting a soft light over the family's chambers. The husband and wife stir, slowly waking as the sounds of the morning begin to make themselves heard. The children, still tucked in their warm beds, remain asleep, peacefully dreaming of their royal ancestors and far-off adventures. The night's rest, divided into two phases, has allowed the noble family to sleep deeply and peacefully, reflecting the rhythms of nature. The morning begins, and they prepare for another day in the life of medieval nobility. In conclusion, the wealthy noble family's nighttime routine, influenced by the biphasic sleep pattern of medieval times, was peaceful and structured, with moments of quiet reflection and family bonding during the midnight awakening. Their royal status was evident not only in their wealth, but in the comfort and luxury of their sleeping arrangements. But it was the simplicity of their rituals, the calmness of the night, and the warmth of their family that truly defined the experience of sleep in medieval times. Segment 2. The impact of the environment on sleep. In medieval times, the environment had a huge impact on sleep patterns. People didn't have the comforts of modern homes. There were no central heating or air conditioning, and many homes were made of stone and wood. The temperatures could be chilly, especially in winter, making sleep a little more uncomfortable. Most people slept in rooms without much insulation. The walls of their homes were thick stone, which kept them cool in the summer, but could make the nights bitterly cold in winter. To cope, people would bundle up in thick woolen blankets or sleep in layers of clothing to retain warmth. A fire often kept burning through the night, but its warmth only extended so far. Families, especially in rural areas, would often share beds. This communal sleeping arrangement not only helped conserve body heat, but also reflected the family-centered nature of medieval life. Sleeping in close quarters was the norm, especially in smaller, less wealthy homes. The absence of artificial lighting also played a significant role in shaping sleep. Once the sun set, it was essentially dark. There were no streetlights or electric lamps to extend the evening. The natural world dictated the timing of rest. People were forced to adjust to the changing seasons, with longer nights in winter leading to longer hours of sleep. Segment 3. What did people do if they couldn't sleep? In medieval times, waking in the middle of the night was not viewed as an interruption, but rather a natural part of the sleep cycle. In fact, this wakeful period was commonly integrated into the rhythms of daily life. Today, we see waking up at night as a problem to be solved, often leading to anxiety or the desire to return to sleep as quickly as possible. However, during the medieval period, this time of wakefulness was embraced and often used for purposeful activities. The middle of the night, not a disruption, but a transition. historical evidence shows that in the medieval period, people often followed a biphasic, two-phase, sleep cycle. After a few hours of sleep, typically between the hours of 9 p.m. and midnight, people would wake up for about 1 to 2 hours before falling back into sleep for the second phase, often until dawn. This natural rhythm of fragmented sleep, referred to as segmented sleep or biphasic sleep, was a widespread pattern across Europe until the late 17th century. The wakeful period in the middle of the night is referenced in various historical texts, literary works, and documents from the medieval period. For instance, historians like Roger Ekirch, in his book At Day's Close Night in Times Past, 2005, have provided extensive documentation on how this segmented sleep cycle was common. Ekirch explains that the concept of sleeping continuously through the night, as is typical today, is a relatively modern development, emerging primarily in the 19th and 20th centuries with the rise of artificial lighting and industrialization. Furthermore, references to wakeful periods are found in medieval literature and religious texts. For example, Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, 14th century, alludes to sleep habits of the time. The first sleep and second sleep are clearly described in various tales, including a mention of how some people would spend their wakeful period quietly reading or thinking, while others might engage in more personal or spiritual reflection. In addition, the Book of Hours, a medieval Christian devotional book, often included specific prayers and rituals for these times of night. People might recite the Matins prayer, the first of the canonical hours, typically performed during the middle of the night as part of their spiritual routine during their wakeful period. It is evident from various surviving texts that the time was sacred and devoted to personal reflection or religious activities. What medieval people did during the wakeful period. During this break in their sleep, medieval people typically engaged in a variety of activities, many of which involved personal or social interaction, often in the company of others. Religious practices, one of the most common activities people engaged in during their midnight wakefulness, was prayer. In fact, the wakeful period was often associated with spiritual practice. Many medieval people were deeply religious, and the nighttime hours provided an opportunity for reflection and devotion. Monks and nuns, particularly those in monasteries, adhered to a strict schedule of prayer throughout the day and night. The practice of praying during the night, called the Liturgy of the Hours, was central to their routine. This often included the recitation of psalms and other prayers in the middle of the night. It wasn't uncommon for people in rural communities, especially those who lived near churches or monasteries, to pray or attend evening masses if they woke up. One significant piece of evidence comes from the Rule of St. Benedict, 6th century, which prescribed a rigorous schedule for monastic life, including the wakeful hours for prayer and work. For example, Matins was one of the night offices that monks were required to observe, often during the hours when most people would be asleep. Matins was said at approximately 2 a.m., and it was part of the wakeful period of segmented sleep that monks and many religious families participated in. Intimate moments and family connection. For couples, the wakeful period was sometimes a time for more private personal interaction. In the absence of the distractions that we now experience, such as entertainment or social media, medieval people often used this time to bond with each other, particularly after a busy day of social and agricultural responsibilities. It wasn't unusual for married couples to engage in intimate conversations or activities during the middle of the night. In his studies, Ekirch highlights that a family's bedroom, especially in rural households, often served as a central gathering space. Couples might use the quiet hours to discuss family matters, discuss the events of the day, or even engage in more personal and intimate moments. Given the lack of privacy and personal space in many households, particularly for lower classes, the night provided a rare opportunity to connect without the pressures of the daytime world. Reading and intellectual reflection. The intellectual and literate class, including scholars, monks, and clerics, also used the wakeful period to read and reflect. Although books were incredibly rare and expensive in the medieval period, literacy was highly prized, especially in religious and noble circles. The wealthier classes, including clergy, had access to written texts, and these could be read during the quiet nighttime hours. One example can be seen in the writings of Sir Thomas Malory, the author of Le Morte d'Arthur, 15th century. He, like many medieval authors, often wrote during the night, a time when he was not distracted by the daily demands of noble life. The night allowed writers and intellectuals an opportunity for contemplation, and many scholars from the period noted how crucial this time was for thinking deeply about spiritual or intellectual matters. In addition, many literary works from the medieval period, including Beowulf and the Arthurian legends, all allude to characters reading or reflecting during the night. These references to intellectual or emotional reflection during the night are supported by historical evidence and underscore the idea that the medieval night, while dark and silent, was full of mental and spiritual activity, socializing and conversing. In medieval homes, particularly in smaller villages and towns, waking in the middle of the night often meant the possibility of socializing. Since many people lived in close quarters with their families or other members of the community, waking hours could be spent chatting with neighbors or family members. In larger cities, or among the nobility, the wakeful period might be used for visiting a neighbor's house or having a more private discussion with family or servants about important matters. Socializing during the night was not only a form of entertainment, but also a way to strengthen community bonds. Various historical texts, including Boccaccio's Decameron, 14th century, highlight how social interaction in the evening was an important part of medieval life. People spent time together, telling stories or sharing news, particularly in rural settings. In larger medieval courts, members of the nobility might also have used this time for private talks or sharing news with close confidants. After the hustle and bustle of court life during the day, the middle of the night was a more private time for such activities. Dream interpretation. Given the pervasive belief in the supernatural and the mystical in the Middle Ages, medieval people also interpreted their dreams during the wakeful period. Dreams were often viewed as messages from God or signs from the divine realm. Therefore, waking in the middle of the night gives people a chance to reflect on their dreams or to pray for clarity in understanding them. Dream interpretation was deeply rooted in medieval culture. For example, Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century mystic and abbess, often wrote about the symbolic meaning of dreams in her theological works. She believed that dreams were a form of divine communication. Dream interpretation was common in both religious and secular circles, and medieval people would often discuss their dreams with religious authorities or within their families. In conclusion, waking up in the middle of the night in medieval times wasn't something to be feared or avoided, as it often is today. Instead, it was an integral part of the medieval sleep cycle and daily life. Whether it was for prayer, personal reflection, intimate moments with loved ones, or engaging in intellectual or social activities, the time spent awake in the night allowed people to connect with themselves and others in a way that was not possible during the busier daytime hours. In fact, as our modern society continues to prioritize uninterrupted sleep, it may be worth reconsidering the practices of the past, where waking up in the middle of the night was seen not as a disturbance, but as a necessary and enriching part of life. The wakeful period of medieval sleep may have provided people with a level of mental and spiritual clarity that many of us, in the rush of modern life, no longer experience. Segment 4. The influence of technology on sleep, the rise of artificial lighting. The evolution of human sleep patterns is intricately tied to the advent of technology, specifically the rise of artificial lighting, which has had profound effects on the way people sleep. In the medieval period, people slept in a manner that was intimately linked to the natural rhythms of the world. However, the introduction of artificial lighting gradually altered these patterns, culminating in the consolidated sleep cycle that we practice today. To understand this shift, it's essential to look at the historical progression of artificial lighting and its impact on sleep. The medieval world and natural lighting. Before the widespread use of artificial lighting, the primary source of light at night was either natural, moonlight and stars, or artificial sources like candles and oil lamps. In the medieval period, these light sources were insufficient to prolong the day into the night, leading people to follow a sleep pattern that was governed by the cycles of the sun. Medieval people typically relied on the natural day-night cycle to determine their sleep habits. With the sun setting early during the winter months and rising late in the morning, People naturally went to bed soon after twilight, often by 8 or 9 p.m. This early bedtime aligned with the first phase of the biphasic sleep cycle, which began after the evening meal. Artificial lighting, the first step toward disrupted sleep patterns. The introduction of artificial lighting was a slow process that began with the use of torches, candles, and oil lamps. In the early medieval period, candles made of tallow, animal fat, and beeswax were commonly used in the homes of the wealthier classes, while rushlights, made from the rush plant soaked in grease, were used by the lower classes. However, these light sources were expensive and inefficient, providing only dim, flickering light. It wasn't until the 15th century that advances in candle production, primarily the development of beeswax candles, offered more reliable and brighter lighting. These advancements allowed the wealthier segments of society to extend their working hours and social activities into the night. While these early sources of light were still limited and expensive, their impact on sleep was significant. People were no longer strictly bound to the natural rhythms of daylight. Wealthy families, especially those in urban centers or at court, could afford to stay awake longer, often engaging in social or intellectual activities well after dark. The Industrial Revolution, the rise of gas and electric lighting. The most significant shift in sleep patterns occurred with the Industrial Revolution and the widespread adoption of gas lighting in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Gas lamps, first introduced in London in the 1800s, could illuminate entire streets, allowing cities to operate well into the night. This new technology marked the beginning of a profound transformation in the daily schedule of people across Europe and the United States. The impact of gas lighting on sleep patterns. The impact of gas lighting on sleep can be seen in historical accounts. In his work, At Day's Close, Night in Times Past, 2005, historian Roger Ekirch describes how the introduction of gas lighting in urban areas encouraged a shift toward extended waking hours. Cities became busier at night, with shops staying open longer and people engaging in more social activities after dark. People, especially in urban settings, began to push back their bedtimes, staying awake well into the late evening. This societal shift led to a more consolidated form of sleep, where people slept for a long stretch through the night, rather than engaging in segmented sleep. The cultural shift was gradual, but by the late 19th century, most people had adapted to sleeping in a continuous block, which became the new societal norm. The introduction of electric lighting and modern sleep. The next major technological leap came with the invention and adoption of electric lighting in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The electric bulb, invented by Thomas Edison in 1879, revolutionized the way people interacted with their environment after dark. No longer dependent on the inefficient, flickering flames of candles and oil lamps, people could now light their homes brightly and cheaply. This made it possible to extend the day indefinitely and effectively eliminated the boundaries between day and night. Electric lighting and sleep consolidation. With the widespread availability of electric light in the early 20th century, the rhythm of human sleep was dramatically changed. People, now able to work and socialize late into the night, no longer adhered to the natural sleep cycles of the past. As Ekirch explains, the biphasic sleep that had been common in pre-industrial societies was replaced by the single, consolidated sleep pattern we follow today. The artificial extension of daylight meant that sleep was no longer confined to a natural window dictated by the sun. By the early 20th century, cultural and social shifts, made possible by artificial lighting, created new standards for sleep. In modern society, sleep has become more structured and consolidated. Research, like that from Thomas Ware, a sleep researcher from the 1990s, indicates that with the advent of artificial lighting, people began to sleep in a continuous block of 7 to 9 hours, with little to no interruptions. The rise of technology and its impact on sleep. Today, fast forward to the 21st century, and the introduction of digital technology, smartphones, computers, and televisions has brought another layer of complexity to our sleep patterns. While electric lighting was the first technological innovation to disrupt the natural sleep cycle, the blue light emitted by screens today has a direct effect on our circadian rhythms, contributing to sleep disturbances and insomnia in modern society. The impact of screens on sleep. Recent studies by Harvard Medical School have shown that exposure to blue light before bedtime suppresses melatonin production, making it harder for people to fall asleep. This phenomenon, driven by the widespread use of digital devices, has compounded the problems created by artificial lighting. Ekirch notes that Edison's electric light bulb had the unintended consequence of encouraging longer work hours and, by extension, social hours that extended far beyond what would have been natural. In today's world, the advent of smartphones and tablets has further blurred the boundaries between day and night. People now carry their work and social interactions with them everywhere, making it harder to disconnect and create a proper sleep environment. Comparing medieval and modern sleep habits. Medieval sleep patterns were in sync with the natural cycles of light and darkness. People in the Middle Ages followed the biphasic sleep cycle for several reasons, with the most prominent being the lack of artificial lighting. The gradual rise of artificial lighting throughout the centuries altered this pattern, beginning with rudimentary sources like candles and evolving into gas lamps and electric bulbs. By the Industrial Revolution, as people gained more access to electric lighting, society's expectations for sleep shifted. This created the foundation for the consolidated sleep cycle that is the norm today. While artificial light extended the length of the waking day, it also necessitated longer, uninterrupted periods of sleep to counterbalance the societal demands for longer active hours. Historical evidence. The cultural shift of sleep patterns. In medieval England, as described in historical documents from the period, the concept of sleeping in two phases was common. However, with the development of lighting, especially with gas lamps in the 19th century, urban working hours were lengthened and a consolidated sleep period became the new standard. This shift is evident in the works of Victorian writers like Charles Dickens, who commented on how the invention of gas lighting allowed for prolonged working hours, thus shortening the natural sleep period. Today, in our age of electricity and 24-hour access to information, many of us live in a world where the concept of rest and sleep is continually interrupted. The historical shift from segmented sleep to continuous sleep is a direct result of technological advances and societal changes that continue to impact our sleep hygiene and overall well-being. So can people have a good sleep in medieval times? It's clear that their sleep habits were deeply tied to their natural environment and the rhythms of the day. The biphasic sleep pattern they followed was influenced by the absence of artificial lighting and the close-knit communal lifestyle they lived. Though their sleep wasn't as uninterrupted as ours, it may have been just as restorative, if not more so. Perhaps we can take a lesson from their sleep habits. In today's modern world, with our over-reliance on artificial light and constant connectivity, we may have lost touch with the natural rhythms of the body. Maybe by embracing elements of the past, we can find better ways to rest and restore our energy. Could a return to segmented sleep, or simply embracing the quiet of the night without distractions, improve our quality of sleep? It's worth exploring, and perhaps in the stillness of the night, we can rediscover the peace that medieval people once knew. And with that, dear listener, we gently close the final page of tonight's journey through the sleep habits of medieval people and a shimmering past. Whether you now dream of silken gowns or scented pomanders, may your sleep be sweet and your imagination soft as velvet. Thank you for joining us. Rest well, take care of your beautiful self, whatever that means to you, and until next time, good night.